So, the previous lecture, we have discussed 3 cache organization. So the first one was fully associative cache. Fully associative cache. So we divide main memory the same size as this cache block. Okay, so you can view memory as a collection of memory blocks, and cache also a collection of a set of cache blocks. So for this example, I'm reviewing this material because some of you are missing in the previous lecture. For 32 kilobyte cache, and the block size is 4 word, each word is 32 bit, which means 16 byte word. So 32 kilobyte divided by 16 byte, you have 2K blocks in the cache. So you have 2048 blocks. In the memory, assuming 32-bit physical address, you can have up to 4 gigabyte DRAM, main memory. If you divide 4 gigabyte DRAM as a cache block size, this is 2 to the power of 32 bytes divided by 2 to the power of 4 bytes, which is cache block size. So you have 2 to the power of 28 blocks. So you are trying to map this 2 to the power of 28 blocks to 2 to the power of 11 cache blocks. Okay? And fully associative cache is any of this memory block can be placed into any cache block. So this is the most flexible. If any of this cache block is empty, you can put memory block in there. Okay? So if this is the structure you want to design, what should be the internal organization of this structure? We need this kind of structure. Because whenever you move this memory block into the cache, you have to identify which memory address this block comes from. And if you look at this 0 to 2 to the power of 28 minus 1, this gives you block number, which block, memory block this came from. Okay? So to identify memory block address, you need 28 bits. 28 bits. Right? That is called tag. So whenever you put memory block into the cache block, you need another information called the tag for each cache block. This data block or instruction block, this data comes from this 28-bit tag, which tells you the memory block address. Okay? So this tag lamp contains the address of each memory block in the cache. Okay, and this valid bit is initially is empty, so you set it to invalid, and whenever you put in a new memory block, you set it to valid. Okay, so if you a processor generates this memory address from the pipeline, so from the pipeline they generate instruction address at fetch stage or the data address at the execution stage. Okay. And these addresses are virtual address because the program use virtual address and the programmer also use virtual address. So it needs to be translated into physical address because these cache and memory, they are using DRAM address. And the address translation part we'll study after we study this memory hierarchy, which is called virtual memory. Okay? So you don't have to worry about. So somehow the virtual address is translated into physical address. Okay? And this is given by the pipeline. So using this physical address or DRAM address, you are trying to identify whether in this cache the data that I am looking for exists. Okay? Then since any data or instruction, any memory block can be placed into any of these cache blocks, you have to compare this tag with the tag in this cache block one by one, right? Because it can exist in any cache block. if you compare it serially, since we have 2048 cycles, it will take 2048 cycles because one cycle, one compare. Okay, that's too long. That's too long. It's usually longer than accessing the main memory directly. Memory access maybe 100 to 500 cycles. Okay, so to use this cache, you have to compare them in parallel. Then you can compare in a single cycle or in a single compare operation. Okay, so fully associative cache, you have 2048 comparators, and each comparator compares 28-bit tag. So it's actually 28 exclusive NOR gauge, right? Because exclusive NOR compares 1 bit equal. So you need 28 exclusive NOR, which is the comparator. Okay, so from the address, the upper 28-bit tells you the memory block address, which is called tag. And the lower 4-bit tells you which byte, which one is the starting byte from out of this 16 byte, because you have 16 byte blocks, right? This address tells you the starting byte address of the particular instructional data you are looking for. So if the offset is 0, you are looking for the first byte. Offset is 15, because it's 4, right? It's the last byte. So if offset is 0, starting from here, if this is program counter, instruction address, if this is for MIPS, you need to extract 4 byte, because MIPS instruction is 4 byte. 4 byte extract and send to the pipeline. If it's data address, if the instruction is load help word instruction, right? Then you need to extract 2 bytes and send to the pipeline for 32-bit processor. Okay, so the offset is determine which one is the byte I'm looking for, right? The starting byte. And the upper 28-bit is the tag. So to determine cache hit or miss, you extract 28-bit tag and compare them simultaneously in parallel in a single compare, right? Compare time, and then you check the value. If it's valid, if any one of them is equal, then you have a cache hit. And then you fetch the block, you extract the instructional data, and send it to the pipeline. This is called fully associative cache. So the advantage is it gives you highest hit rate compared to the other 2 cache organization, because this is the most flexible. Memory block can be placed in anywhere. Okay? And it's quite fast, because hit or miss can be determined by a single compare operation. You just need a single compare. Right? The problem is you need many comparators here. Right? 2048 comparators, which means its size is bigger, right? Because of this overhead. Even though data size is this much, you need 28-bit tag and comparators. So it's bigger. So this is usually good for if you really need high performance, high hit rate, okay, and fast operation, then you need to use this fully associative cache. Okay. The other extreme of cache organization is limiting only one location, because you don't want too many comparators. The size is too big. Okay, you want to simplify. So you are given the same configuration, 2048 cache block, 2 to the power of 28 memory blocks. Here you divide memory, physical memory, main memory, into cache size. Cache size. First 2048, second 2048, third 2048, and so on. In the first 2048, first block mapped to the first cache block. The second block mapped to the second cache block. The last block mapped to the last block. And the second 2048, the first block is mapped to the first block, second block is mapped to the second block, and so on. Then, for each memory block, there is only one location you can be placed in, right? So you are limiting yourself into only one cache block, okay? This is called direct mapped cache. Then, somehow, if you know the address, then you have to examine only one location. You don't have to look for other location because there is only one place you can be placed in. Okay? That is determined by this 11-bit. So this 28-bit memory block address is divided into 17-bit tag and 11-bit index. And index tells you which cache block I have to look up to determine hit or miss. Because for every memory block, there is only one location I can go into. Okay? So using the 11-bit, I can identify this is the memory block that I have to look up. And I have to compare the tag. If the tag is equal, then I have a cache hit. Right? So to organize cache in this structure, we need this kind of hardware. So same as the data lamp, just same. But here tags are only 17-bit. So the address provided by the pipeline, we have 32-bit address are divided into 17-bit tag, 11-bit index, and 4-bit offset. Offset is the same. It's the byte in the cache block, byte location in the cache block. So using the 11-bit index, I can identify this one. I have to examine or I have to look up. Okay? For the other location, there is no chance because in direct map cache, there is only one place I can go into. Okay? Using this 11-bit index, I do the decoding and I identify this location. This is the cache block I have to look up. But I should check the tag because I should have to confirm that this is the memory block I am looking for. And this tag extracted from the physical address and the tag stored in the cache should match to determine the hit. Okay? So the cache hit miss determination, you first need decoding, right? And then compare. And then you check the valid and you have a cache hit. Okay? And this one is a little bit slower than fully associative cache because you need decoding in addition to compare, right? The previous fully associative cache require only compare time, but this is decoding plus compare. It's a little bit slow. But the advantage is you only need one comparator, okay? Instead of 2048 comparator. So the size is much smaller. Okay? So simple hardware, and it's fast but slower than the other. Slower than fully associative cache, but faster than the third organization which we will study. Okay? But it has some lower hit rate compared to fully associative cache because you are limiting yourself to only one location. If you are unlucky, you are accessing your memory access pattern is like this. You access this block, this block, this block, this block, and so on. Then even though other locations are empty, all the blocks are mapped to the same location. It's evicting the previous one. So you have a consecutive cache miss, although you can cache in other locations. And this is called conflict miss or collision miss because it's collide into the same position. Okay? Because of this conflict miss, it has lower miss rate. Okay? The third one is in between. Okay, you have two extreme cache organization. Fully associative cache, you have the most freedom. Okay, memory block can be placed into anywhere. Direct map cache, they limit only one location. That's too much restriction. Instead, let's give them two options. It's called two-way shadow shift cache. Okay, so instead of single location, you can go into two locations instead. If you allow 4 different locations, it's called four-way associative cache. Okay? So here in this example, this shows two-way associative cache. So same as before, we have 2048 blocks and 2 to the power of 28 blocks. You are mapping memory block into the cache. But here, you divide 2048 block into two different banks. 1048 block for way 0 bank and 1048 way 1 bank. We have two banks. each bank you have 2 locations you can go to. Okay? And then for the memory, you divide this memory into cache bank size. So bank size is 1024. So you divide into 1024 bank blocks, second 1024, third 1024, and so on. If you look at the first 1024, the first block can be placed into 2 locations, one for each bank. Okay? The first block in way 0 bank and the first block in way 1 bank. It has 2 options, way 0 and way 1. Okay, the second block can go to the second block of way 0 bank or second block of way 1 bank and so on. Okay, if you look at the second cache 1024 blocks, the first block you have 2 locations, the second block you have 2 locations, and so on. Okay, so if you identify particular memory block, memory address, you are given 2 options. One in way 0, another in way 1. Right? For each bank, you have 1 way. So, here, the collection of this block and this block is called 1 set. Okay? You have 2 sets and you have 1024 sets. Each set has 2 blocks because you have 2 ways. One block in each bank. Okay? So, if you identify some memory block, you have to identify which set I have to look up. Right? Each set has 2 options. Okay? Way 0, way 1. Okay? To do that, this memory block address is divided into 18-bit tag and 10-bit index. This 10-bit index determines which set you have to look up. Using the 10-bit index, you identify, let's say, set 500. Then you have 500 block in way 0 and block 500 in way 1. Right? So each set has 2 blocks. One in bank 0, one in bank 1. Okay? Using the index, 10-bit index, you can identify the set. And then you have to look up 2 locations. Okay? So that gives you more freedom because if you are limiting only 1 location, you may have conflict miss. But if you allow 2 locations, if there is already placed, it can be placed into other bank. So you can reduce this conflict message. Okay, that's the idea. So the cache organization is 32-bit physical address is divided into 18-bit tag, 10-bit index, and 4-bit block offset. Block offsets are the same. Okay, you extract 10-bit index, do the decoding, you identify the set. This set you have 2 blocks, one in way 0, the other in way 1. You have 2 banks in parallel. Okay? So you have to examine these 2 locations. So using the tag, you have to compare these 2 tags simultaneously. So you need 2 comparators. Okay? If any of them is equal and if it's valid, you have a cache hit. For the data block, you fetch the blocks. You have to select, depending on the comparison result, you have to select 1 out of 2. Right? And then using the block offset, you extract the byte and send it to the pipeline. Okay? This is called set associative cache. Even though you add 1 comparator and maybe Waymoth, using this 2-way set associative cache, you can reduce conflict miss effectively. Okay? So most of the caches are implemented using this structure, set associative cache. If the caches are big enough, then this is quite good. Okay, the access time, if you determine hit or miss, this requires decoding, compare, and Waymoth. So it's a little bit slower than direct mapped cache, but about comparable. Okay, this is called set associative cache. Okay, let's look at. Okay. Before I go into there, let's look at adults. Okay, so far, so for those of you who don't know what is cache, let me review a little bit. Cache is a small memory located between processor, which means pipeline, and main memory. So cache is fast because of three reasons. Cache is fast because it's small. Small means it's fast, because large memory means you need more decoding, more wire delay. Cache is usually small because it's expensive. So it's fast, because small means fast. It's fast, so the first reason is fast because it's small. The second reason is it's fast because it's made of SRAM instead of DRAM. SRAM, static RAMs are faster than dynamic RAMs. Okay, we will study what is static, what is dynamic, a little bit more detail. Okay, static RAM means latch. Dynamic RAM means single transistor, single bit. It's a capacitor, okay, or switch. Okay, so for DRAM, one bit requires one transistor. For SRAM, one bit requires at least 6 or more, 6, 8 or more transistors. Okay, it's big because it's fast. Okay. So it's fast because it's small. It's fast because it's made of SRAM cell. It's fast because it's closer than main memory, because it's located between processor and main memory. Right? It's closer. It's right next to the pipeline. Okay, so it's faster. Okay, using the cache, you can reduce load latency because you have to get the data from the cache. If you hit the cache, you don't have to go to main memory. Okay, so you can reduce read time, and you can also reduce write time because you can write into the cache directly. You don't have to write into the main memory. Main memory is far away, right? First level cache, second level cache, third level cache, backside bus, frontside bus, chipset, and memory bus, and so on. It's 산 넘고 물 건너. Okay? 멀리 있어, 멀리. It's close. And it's good because it can reduce bus traffic. Usually caches are on chip, okay? Right next to the pipeline. So if you don't have cache, every memory transaction, every memory load or store should go off chip, right? Which means to the pins, I/O pins, and bus, and so on. Then buses are usually very, very slow, which means you are saturated by this I/O, bus or pin I/O, okay? But since the cache hit rate is usually more than 99%, less than 1% will go out of chip. You can reduce lots of bus traffic, which can substantially improve your performance. Without cache, it's too much I/O bound, right? I/O bounded. That's the benefit. So that is the cache. So initially, caches are empty. They are empty because you have never accessed any instructional data. But once on the first access, you will miss the cache because caches are empty, right? So you'll go to memory eventually. From the memory, you fetch a memory block. But instead of just extract the instruction and use it, you actually store into the cache, right? You store into the cache, and next time if you use the same instruction, you can reuse the instruction or data. Okay? So on a read miss, you always allocate, which means if on a road, if you miss, you have to bring the block and store into the cache. On a write, on a store operation, that you have two options. You can allocate, which means if you miss, you bring the block into the cache and you do the write. Right? That is called write allocate. Sometimes you bypass this cache and write into the memory directly. You don't have to allocate. That is called no write allocate. Okay? But most high performance caches are implemented using write allocate. So for both read or write, you bring the memory block into the cache, place into the cache block. Okay? Let's look at the replacement policy. So this is called placement. Okay? Allocation. And placement, replacement means once you start to use caches eventually all the cache blocks will be valid, which means it's full. Okay? If you miss the cache, you want to bring a new memory block into the cache. If you want to put it into the cache, you have to evict some of the existing block, right? You have to select a victim, okay? And you have to replace with the new one, okay? Which one would you replace? That is called replacement policy. And the best algorithm, or the most frequently used algorithm, is called LRU, least recently used algorithm. The idea is every time you access this cache block, right? If you access read or write, you set the timer. Okay, it's timestamp. You record the time. Okay, and then whenever the cache is full, you are trying to find the victim. You try to find the victim, which is the cache block with the oldest timestamp, which means this block has not been referenced for the longest time. Okay, that is the victim. And essentially, conceptually, you need a timestamp to do that, right? And this will give you usually the most good hit rate, because if it has not been referenced for the longest time, then it's likely that it will not be used again in the future, based on the locality principle which we studied. We have two locality, one is temporal and spatial locality. Okay? However, putting this timestamp into the cache and doing this compare means you have to find the one with the oldest timestamp. You have to compare everybody, right? It takes time. It's too much expensive. So instead of LRU, they mimic or they simulate LRU, which is called pseudo LRU. Pseudo. It's close to LRU, but not exactly LRU. And they use some a few bits. It's called least frequently used bit. So whenever you access, you set the bit. Whenever you, from time to time, you reset, you set, and so on. And they can approximate LRU, and it's called pseudo LRU. Okay? The other algorithm is called random. Instead of finding a block with the oldest timestamp, just pick randomly one block and replace it. And for small cache, this is good. For large cache, it doesn't matter, about the same. Because if you have too many blocks, you find the one that has not been referenced for the longest time, or if you find anyone, right, pick randomly, it gives you about the same hit rate. Okay? So random is used for medium size or large caches. The problem is random algorithm is not easy also, right? So if you remember C programming, random number generation is not easy, right? So they simulate pseudo-random. It's kind of hashing. Hashing means from the 32-bit address, you select some bits and do the exclusive OR and generate some bits, right? That you select one out of 1024 maybe set. Okay? One out of 1000 maybe not 1024. Actually, for fully associative cache, you have to select one out of 2048, right? For the previous one, which we studied. For two-way set associative cache, you actually select one out of 2, right? We just need one bit to determine which one, right? For direct mapped cache, you don't need this replacement because you have to evict the one, because there is only one location. You don't have to have this replacement policy, right? Okay. Anyhow, pseudo-random is more like hashing. And this replacement policy is critical for small caches, but for large caches, it's not important. Okay? Let's think about write policy and policy. So you have a cache, you have a memory. When you do a write, you have two options. Write through means even if you hit the cache, okay, the idea is you write into the cache and also at the same time you write into the memory. You write through, okay, write to the cache, write to the memory. That is called write through cache. Write back cache means you only write into the cache. You don't care. That means memory might contain old block, right? Because you only update the cache block. So memory might be not consistent with the cache status. Okay, that's the problem. But you can just write to the cache. And when do you write? Whenever that block is replaced. Okay, whenever that block is replaced, then you update main memory. It's called write back caches. Write back caches. So to do that, the cache block should have another status called dirty bit or modified bit. Okay, modified bit means you have written to this block before, right? It's dirty. So whenever a dirty block is replaced, you have to update memory because this is the most up-to-date copy. Right? You have to update memory also, right? So you need dirty bit in the status, not just valid bit. You need valid bit, or dirty bit, or modified bit, whatever. Okay, that is called write back cache. And this write back cache is quite important for high performance caches because you can reduce write traffic. Write through cache is simple because whenever you write into the memory, and memories are always consistent. This is good for cache coherence, which you don't know, but cache there are some issues. But it generates too much write traffic. Whenever you write, you have to generate traffic on the bus. Right? Bus is very, very slow. If you generate too much traffic, it will slow down the system. Okay? And this is the problem. But write back cache, you write 100 times, but you only write into the cache. You don't generate any write traffic. When this block is replaced, then you update memory. Okay, you generate only one traffic. Okay, so you can reduce write traffic substantially, and it can improve system performance. So for high performance caches, for high performance processors, nowadays they all use write back cache to reduce bus traffic. Okay. It's a little bit complex, more complex than write through, but it gives you higher performance. And write through cache usually use no write or locate policy because whenever you do a write, you write into the memory. So you do not bring the memory block into the cache. Write is always through to the cache and memory. So they use no write or locate policy. But for write back cache, you use write or locate policy, which means if you miss on a write, if you miss, you bring the block first into the cache and you do the write and modify. And you can modify multiple times. And when this block is replaced, you can update memory. Okay? So they use write or locate policy. And you can think write back with write or locate policy, this cache is common for your processors you are using for smartphones and notebooks or PCs. They use this kind of cache, write back cache with write or locate policy. Okay? So we have reviewed this kind of cache design. We have reviewed where we'll place this block into the cache depending on the freedom we have. The most flexible one is fully associative cache. The most limiting one was direct mapped cache. In general, we are using this cache organization frequently, okay? More often, set associative cache. And to determine hit or miss, the memory address should be divided into tag, index, and offset, right? And for replacement, you can use random or RLU. Write policy, you can use write through or write back. Let's classify cache misses into three different types. So you can miss the cache based on these three different regions. The first one is called cold start miss or compulsory miss. Cold start miss means initially caches are empty. So if you access cache, you always miss the cache. So by definition, the first access to a memory block, to some memory block, if this is the first access to that block, then it will always miss the cache. Because this is the first access, you have never referenced that block before. So you will miss the cache, you have to bring the block from memory. Okay? So even if you have an infinite cache, okay, you have a maybe 4 GB cache, you will miss the cache because you have accessed this block for the first time. Okay? This is called cold start because it's cold initially. When you access the data or instructions filled into the cache, this is called warm. Or compulsory miss. The second type of miss is called capacity miss. Capacity miss is because of the size. If your cache size is a little bit bigger, it will still remain in the cache. But because of the size limitation, you have to evict this one. Right? This is called capacity miss. Okay? If the memory block used by a program is bigger than the cache size, then capacity miss will occur due to the cache block replacement. Because it cannot stay there forever. Right? It's limited. Because of the size, it should be evicted somehow. But if your cache size is a little bit bigger, it may stay there. Right? Then you can avoid. But because of size limitation, you are experiencing this type of miss. This is called capacity miss. So this capacity miss can occur even in fully associative cache. Right? If you have 32-bit fully associative cache, as we have studied before, we have 2048 blocks. Once you feed in 2048 cache blocks, a new block came in, then you have to evict something, right? And if you have 2049 blocks, then it can stay there. But since you have 2048, it should be evicted. Okay? That's called capacity miss. Okay? The third type of miss is called collision miss or conflict miss. This occurs only for direct map or set associative cache. Because you are limiting placement into only one location in direct mapped cache or only 2 or 4 locations in set associative cache. Okay? So even though other locations are empty, because in direct mapped cache, there is only one location you can be placed in. If this is full, right, then you have to evict this one, right? And you have to go in there. Right? This is called conflict miss. If you allow two-way set associative cache, it may still stay there. Right? If you allow fully associative cache, you can stay anywhere. Right? So this is called conflict miss. Conflict miss. Invalidation miss is because of cache coherence issues, which usually I don't teach. I don't actually give a lecture to undergraduate students, but let me give you some basic idea of what is cache coherence and what is invalidation message. This was my PhD thesis topic when I was at school. So I was doing some cache coherence issue for supercomputer design. When you have many parallel processors, how you can maintain coherence, because using cache, you need to maintain cache coherence, otherwise the problem execution result will be incorrect. Right? You have to maintain cache coherence. Without cache, your performance will slow down substantially. So that is one issue. Anyhow, cache coherence issue is like this. You have one CPU, you have two CPU. CPU 0, CPU 1. And you have memory, and this is bus. You have same block, 3 copies. Right? You bring this block into your cache. You bring this block into your another processor. Okay, the same cache. So let's say this is block A. Okay. So original value was 5. 5, 5. You update the CPU to store into its local cache, because this is write back cache, and this becomes 6. Okay? When this CPU is trying to access the same memory location, it should read the new value, but it's reading the old value 5, and this will give you incorrect result. Okay? And if the processor core, there are many processor cores, then bus structure, okay, I'll not discuss the details. Okay, anyhow, let's look at the simple case, bus-based multi-core systems. Okay, so how we can maintain cache coherence? To do that, we need some kind of algorithm. Say, whenever you do a write, if you look at this bus is this, let's say for PCs, we are using 64-bit data bus. This is data, but you need also address bus. Let's say we have 32-bit address. But I'm writing to this address for this data, or I'm reading this address, and they're sending this data. Okay? There are address bus lines and data bus lines. And whenever I'm doing a write, I have to broadcast this information to everybody else. So there is a read-write signal, another control signal. So whenever this processor CPU 0 is doing a write, it broadcasts, I'm doing a write, okay? Right? To particular this address. Okay? Then there are two options. One is, whenever I do a write, then every processor is listening this signal lines. If anybody is doing a write. If anybody is doing a write, you have two options. One is you can update, if they broadcast this data, they can update their data simultaneously using the broadcast. It's called the write broadcast. Okay? Then whenever you do a write, you actually update every copies. Okay? It's write broadcast. The other option is, whenever you do a write, you can invalidate the other one. Since you invalidate, you will look for other more up-to-date block, and you can get the most up-to-date block from here to there. It's called write invalidate. So they usually use write invalidate protocol, because write broadcast means whenever you do a write, you have to generate write traffic on the data bus. And it generates too much traffic, it will reduce the system performance. Instead, if you do a write invalidate, you don't generate write traffic. You generate the signal only. Okay? Using signal, you can invalidate locally. So each processor has this coherence engine. It's called snooping engine. Snooping engine. Snoop means it's listening. Okay? Snoop is called listening. They always monitor this bus signal. Whenever the other process is doing a write, then they get this address. Using this address, they look up their tag. If there is a match, hit, then they have to invalidate. Right? Because it becomes old data, stale data. And this becomes stale data. They have to invalidate. This is called snooping. Snooping. Okay? So this snoop cache coherence problem can occur for multi-cores, even in unicores, even in single processor system. Without the other processor, there might be a DMA. DMA means direct memory access device, such as disk controllers. This controller, disk device can do a write to memory directly without CPU involvement. Okay, they can do the block transfer on a page miss. Okay, and then they update with this new one, and this one becomes stale. Okay, and they have to monitor this DMA operation also. So even essentially, this cache coherence engine or snooping engine is required for every processor. Every processor. So if you look at your CPU used for your PCs or smartphone, they all have this hardware engine. They monitor this bus, and whenever there is a write transaction, they examine their tag. If there is a match, they have to invalidate. Okay, it's called invalidation method. It's in there, but it's invalidated by the coherence engine. And it's because of shared by multiprocessors or by the I/O device. Okay? 알겠죠? So for cache block status, you need valid bit. Okay, you have also modified bit for dirty bit, right? So this kind of snooping coherence protocols are called MESI or MOESI protocol. They may have more stage to improve performance. This is modified, exclusive, shared, invalid, modified, ownership, exclusive, shared, invalid. So you can see this kind of protocol, mesh protocols. Those are bus-based cache coherence protocols. This is only for small-scale multiprocessors, such as multi-core used for your CPUs. But if your processor's number is greater than 8, you cannot use bus because bus is too slow. You have to use other interconnection network, and you need different cache coherence protocols and different mechanism. Okay, so if your processor number is very large, such as supercomputer, then you need totally different maintenance cache coherence algorithm because you cannot snoop. The bus is shared, you can snoop, but other interconnection you cannot snoop. You don't know somebody else is doing whatever. So that is one issue. Anyhow, that's the invalidation message. Okay. Okay, this is the cache miss rate breakdown. So this is miss rate, the hit rate. Okay, so 1 kilobyte fully associative cache miss ratio is about a little more than 13%. So 1 kilobyte cache means 13 out of 100 will miss the cache. Oh, this is direct mapped cache. Direct mapped cache. The upper graph is direct mapped cache. If it's two-way associative cache, you can reduce this miss rate to a little less than 11% because you can reduce conflict message. Four-way associative cache, you can reduce this much conflict message. And this is conflict message. Okay? Fully associative cache, the miss rate you can reduce by 8%. Okay? And the other you cannot reduce because this is capacity message. This is compulsory or cold start message. So if you look at here, cold start messages are very small. That means the first accessor to a block is only small portion because you access many times usually. Okay? And this is capacity miss will be decreased as you increase the cache size. And this conflict miss will be reduced as well as you increase the cache size because you have enough location. You don't conflict anymore. Okay? So for small caches, fully associative cache can reduce the miss rate effectively, right? Or two-way associative cache of associative. But for large caches, two-way associative cache or direct mapped cache or fully associative, not that much difference. Okay? So cache size for i7 processor, usually first level cache might be maybe about 16 kilobytes. Second level cache might be about maybe 256 kilobytes, something like that. Third level cache can be maybe 2 megabytes. And third level cache, it doesn't matter much. Maybe two-way associative cache or direct mapped cache might be enough. But small caches, right? First level caches, maybe you should use 2A or 4A because cache hit ratio is quite important for first level cache. Okay. Okay, so cache performance, you have to think of this equation. Average memory access time. Average memory access time is equal to cache hit time because you have to look up the cache anyway, no matter hit or miss. Okay? Plus, if you miss, then you have to pay miss penalty. You have to go to memory. Okay? So average memory access time is equal to hit time. 스택 탑. 아, 메모하고 있는 건가? 친구한테 보내는 거지? 뭐 여유가 되면 뒤로 패러럴 프로세싱 할 수 있으면 스택 탑. Anyway. So average memory access time is hit time. You have to look up the cache. Okay? No matter hit or miss. And then if you miss, you should pay the penalty. To improve cache performance, you should reduce the hit time, miss rate, and miss penalty. And there are a bunch of techniques we can reduce this average memory access time, which I will not discuss in this class. Maybe only in the graduate class. Okay? But there are many structures you can improve this cache performance. Cache is quite simple, right? But actually, when I design Itinium processor, we divide the team into 3 different teams. One is core pipeline, the second is memory, cache, the third team was IA32 engine, which translates IA32 instruction, x86 instruction into IA64 new instruction by hardware. This is a small part. And I was working on the pipeline design team, but the memory design was the most complex. It's always lagging behind the schedule. So we always wait for the memory team because conceptually it's simple, but this to improve performance, and there are cache currency issue, and there are memory ordering issue and other complex issues which complicate the memory system design. Okay? But you don't have to know. Okay? If you are designing CPU, maybe in the future, maybe. Okay. Let's look at this average memory access time a little bit. Let's say you have a L1 cache and hit rate is, let's say, 95%. And access time, hit time, or access time, one CPU cycle. If you miss penalty, if you miss, you have to go to memory and get the block. It takes, let's say, 400 cycle. Let's start from 100 cycle. Setup. So average memory access time is equal to hit time is one cycle plus miss rate is how much?
5%.
So that's 0.05. Right? 0.05 times miss penalty is how much? 100. Okay? And then average memory access time is how much? 6. Okay? This is average memory access time. Let's say this is too slow. We want to improve this system. Okay? Let's change this 100 into 400. Then average memory access time becomes how much? 21. This is usually unacceptable, right? So you have to add another level of cache to improve memory system performance. Then average memory access time with L1, L2 equal setup is same as before. The first level cache access time is same. 1 plus miss rate is the same, right? But miss penalty is different, right? You have L2 cache, okay? Let's say L2 cache hit rate is 99%, okay? Assume that. Miss penalty, same as before, 400 cycles, okay? Then, instead of 400, you replace this miss penalty with average memory access time equation recursively, okay? You have to look up L2. L2 hit time is how much? Let's say hit time is bigger, so it's say 4 cycles, okay? So first L2 hit time, that's 4, plus miss rate is how much? 0.01 times miss penalty? 400. So this is how much? This is 448, right? This is how much? 1.4, right? So by adding another level of cache, you can reduce average memory substantially, right? That's why we are using multi-level caches, okay? And if it's too big, you have to employ another third level cache here, right? Then you can reduce that, okay? Excuse me? Why? Which one? Here? Which one? Hit time? No, because as I said, you need to access the cache regardless of hit or miss, right? You have to determine hit or miss, then you have to pay. Okay? Okay? Understood? 쉽죠? Easy. See. So usually if you add another level of cache, level 2 cache size is usually bigger. Block size is also bigger, right, as you increase the cache. Let's look at the block size impact on the performance. So on a miss, you have to bring an entire block, right? So this miss penalty can be divided into access time or latency and transfer time. And this is determined by the bandwidth. So access time means the first byte will arrive, right? Sometime later, you miss cache, you go to off-chip bus, chipset, memory bus, somehow the first byte will arrive maybe in 400 cycles, right? And then you are not accessing a single byte, you are accessing maybe 32 byte or 64 byte, one block, right? So second byte, third byte will arrive. It depends on the bus width and bus clock speed, right? So if your bus is 64 bit wide for PC, they all use the 64-bit system bus, data bus. And bus clock cycle is 100 megahertz. Okay? Then on the maybe after 400 cycles, 8 bytes will alive. 8 bytes will alive simultaneously. Right? Because the width is 64-bit, it is 8 bytes. In the second clock cycle, another 8 bytes. The third clock cycle, another 8 bytes, until you fill this cache block, which can be 32 or 64 bytes. Right? If the cache block size is 64 bytes, then you need how many bus clock transfers? 8 times 8. 8 bus times classical. What's the bus cycle time? Bus cycle time is 100 megahertz, which means 10 nanosecond. Right? So every 10 nanosecond you will receive 8 bytes. 8 bytes. So the bus bandwidth here, bandwidth means how many bytes it can transfer per second. So if you have 100 megahertz 64-bit data bus, then your bus bandwidth is, this is 8 bytes times 100 mega is actually 100 million bytes per second. Right? Because in 1 second you have 100 million, 1 million transfers. And each transfer you have 8 bytes. So it's actually 8 million bytes per, 8 megabytes per second. That's the bandwidth. So this transfer time depends on the bandwidth, which means it depends on the bus width and bus clock speed. Okay? So this portion is called latency, and this portion is determined by bandwidth. Okay? So you know what is latency and what is bandwidth. So as you increase the block size, latency part is the same. Access time, the first byte will arrive at the same time, right? At least regardless of the block size. But as you increase the block size, this transfer time increases, right? So, and if you increase block size, usually because of spatial locality, miss rates are decreasing. If you increase too much, then it will increase again, I guess. But anyhow, usually this trend. So, average memory access time, which is usually, if you increase your block size, average memory access time will be decreased. Sometimes, if your block size is too big, then because of this transfer time and overhead, it will start to increase. So there is some sweet spot. And this sweet spot depends on the cache size. Okay? For small cache, small blocks. For large cache, you need a larger block to find this optimum block size. Okay? Okay, so we have studied caches. Let's move to main memory, DRAM. Okay, before we go into DRAM, memory device technology, you have two technology. One is static RAM, the other is dynamic RAM. Static RAM is actually, you can view them as latch. You have studied in your digital logic. This is a latch. You have a loop. So you can maintain your state as long as the power is supplied. Okay, that's the static RAM. Dynamic RAM is this. You have only single transistor capacitor. You charge, you can maintain your state. But this is not a perfect switch. So there is a leakage current. So slowly it will be discharged. So you need to refresh, which means you have to recharge. That's the dynamic RAM. So dynamic RAM and static RAM. Okay? And this static RAM is used for registers. Register means flip-flop, latch, register, buffers. essentially all the memory logic inside CPU are latches. Okay? This one is used for only main memory card, only for that part. Okay? So everybody else is SRAM. Okay? Static RAM requires at least 6 transistors because this is the static RAM, SRAM cell organization. Transistor 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is the basic static RAM, a single port cell, the smallest SRAM cell. Requires 6 transistors. If you add another port, you need 2 more transistors here. Okay? So 8 transistors. If you add 1 more port, 2 more transistors and so on. Port, think of 2 read port, 1 write port for the pipeline. Right? Register file has 2 read port and 1 write port, which means every cycle you can do a 2 read, 1 write. Each port requires this kind of word line selection. Okay? So which means you have to add at least 2 transistors. If you add transistor, this area becomes bigger and bigger, and this load becomes bigger. So to maintain the same speed, transistor size you should increase a little bit. Okay, and you have more connection wired, which means the cell size becomes larger and larger. So usually the SRAM cell, this is in terms of speed is much faster than DRAM, but in terms of size is actually much larger, which means if you have 1 gigabit DRAM is a single transistor cell. So 1 gigabit, here giga means 2 to the power of 30. Okay? If you know DRAM, right? DRAM. The Korea is famous for DRAM, right? And you say 1 gigabit or 4 gigabit DRAM. These are all 1 gigabit bit, not byte. DRAM capacity is chip capacity is a bit. 1 gigabit means you have 2 to the power of 30 bits in this chip. 4 gigabit DRAM chip means you have 2 to the power of 32 bits in this DRAM chip. Okay, I may ask you the exam, okay, even though I didn't write here. So if you have 1 gigabit DRAM chip, it means it has at least 2 to the power of 30 transistors, right? So it has actually more than 1 billion transistors, right? Because they require some extra peripheral circuitry as well. Okay? But if you have 1 gigabit DRAM using the same technology, SRAM cell requires at least 6 or more, right? But 6 means not just 6 transistors, you need more wires. Wires also occupy space. So the smallest one, the simplest SRAM cell requires at least 8 times more area for each cell, right? Maybe if you add more ports, maybe 16. So usually chip density 1 gigabit DRAM, then you have to consider 128 megabit SRAM or 64 megabit SRAM. The ratio is 1 to 8 or 1 to 16 because of the area, much bigger SRAM cell. Understood? SRAM cell is much bigger, so using the same semiconductor process technology, the cell is much bigger. So static RAM, state can be retained while power is supplied. That's it's called static RAM. They can maintain their state. It's called static RAM. Okay, they use latch, much faster, but much larger, which means more expensive, much more expensive. It's used for registers, on-chip caches, off-chip caches, buffers, everything else except main memory. Okay, it's DRAM. That's SRAM. Okay, DRAM is state is discharged as time go by because it's capacitor. This is NMOS transistor. NMOS transistor, if this one is high, it turns on, which means this is a switch. if you put gate voltage high, then you turn on. That means current flows. And then it becomes zero because you connect. And the current flows from VDD to ground. If the gate is high, if the gate is low, then you disconnect. Then it means it's disconnected. So you can maintain your high voltage because there is no current flowing. Okay? It's a switch. CMOS is a switch. Okay? We are using CMOS logic for almost all commercial VLSI circuit. And CMOS means complementary MOS technology. You use NMOS and PMOS. So if you look at the CMOS, upper part you use PMOS and lower part you use NMOS. It's complementary. Okay? But this CMOS transistor, we call it semiconductor, which means it's not a perfect switch. It's imperfect switch. Even though you turn off, there is a 찔끔찔끔 leakage current flowing. So eventually, it was high, but slowly, as time goes by, it becomes low. It becomes zero. Before it goes into zero, you have to recharge. This is called refresh. Okay? Refresh. This is called dynamic RAM. So every few milliseconds, you need a refresh. Otherwise, you lose your memory. Okay? Density, because you need only one transistor, is much more compact. You have much bigger capacity. You can have much bigger capacity, usually 16 times of SRAM capacity using the same technology. And DRAM you use two different address, row address, column address, which we will study later. And you need some interface logic because you need refresh, and all dynamic logic we need pre-charge. Recharge. We will study in the VLSI class, okay? And this is used for main memory. Let me give you a simple explanation for SRAM and DRAM operation. Okay, let's look at this SRAM cell. If you want to do a write, you drive the bit line. So at all age you have normal output, complemented output, which is actually here. It's actually here. This is Q and Q bar. Whenever you studied this digital logic, you are familiar with this Q bar, right? Complemented output. So Q bar, okay? Anyhow, you can read or you can write, okay? If you want to write, you drive. If you want to store 1, you drive high, you drive low at the same time. And then you select this one. This is connected to the output of the decoder. You give your address, and address determines particular cell, and that selection line enables this word line. Okay? And then this particular cell is activated. Then this will write into the cell. Okay? 10101. It's like set listen, let. Okay? Lead line, you do a pre-charge, some dynamic circuit. In the upper part, you have pre-charge. And then you select low based on the decoder. You put the address, select row. And then the current will flow here and here. One is Q and Q bar. And there is called sense amplifier. Sense amplifier means the signal is small, so you are trying to amplify the signal and trying to listen whether this is 1 or 0. It's called sense amplifier. And you can read whether it has stored 1 or 0. That is for the SRAM. Okay? 알겠죠? DRAM we'll study next week. Okay?